All right, well, thank you all for being with me today. So, my name is Ryan Groove, if you weren't at the last panel. So, I am the IT director at Banner Health. I have accountability of 8 data centers, 1,100 edge sites. I also run the monitoring team, as well as the infrastructure cabling team. So, let's go ahead and kick this off. So, today's presentation is IT/OT Convergence, the challenge of merging two worlds, which if you have worked in the data center space for a long time, if you've worked both either facilities or IT or both, you know this is a pretty big challenge. So, a little bit about me. So again, this presentation here, so a little bit about me. So again, I've been with Banner Health for about 15 years now. And again, I started off my career as a junior operator back in the day. So I was the one monitoring the Cerner screens, the Med Series 4 screens, monitoring mainframe. It was a pretty interesting start to my career. I did actually spend 2.5 years at Corbin's Electric prior to that, so I was the one IT admin that wore all the hats. So I did everything from desktop support to telephony to firewalls. I had to teach myself a lot of things because that was right after college. But again, been with Banner for a while. Got into leadership about 2014 after the prior ops director left, so I actually took that position. In my time at Banner, I have run the NOC, I have run the data center, I ran the what we called the enterprise systems management team at one time, which was a lot of tools, monitoring, etc. Ran AV for a year, and actually I was the first director in over 10 years to successfully change out AV, so go me. And then once my prior boss left, that's when I took over as the head of the data centers, but again, I do have 3 assignments now, data centers, like I said, data centers, cabling, as well as I got the monitoring team back. So a little bit more about me. So I am the AFCOM chapter president for Phoenix. So hopefully if you are in the Phoenix metro area, please come check out a local event. You will find me there. I was on the Next Gen Advisory Board when that existed. That was 2011 or 2021 to 2022. And then just a little bit more about me. So do have a Bachelor's of Science in Software Engineering, Master's of Science in Information Management. I am a certified PMP. DC-DC through BICSI, as well as a DSIP through the United States Department of Energy. Real quick disclaimer, this is more of a research opinion thing. So this is something I've been tracking in the industry for a long time, noticing problems within my own site. So again, I'm not selling you on anything. As you heard in the last presentation, I'm an end user, so I'm just here to give you advice, some things that I've seen. If you do want to go find some specific product, make sure you do your proper research. Like I said in the last panel, make sure you do all your homework before you go out and start looking at something. All right. So the agenda. So I assume most of you probably in the room know what operational technology is, but I'm going to do a quick run through of that. We're going to do a brief history of OT. And then I'm going to get into more of the meat of the topic around challenges of OT management in the IT world, because these two spaces are doing this now. They're coming very closely together, as well as how should we address those challenges. Starting off, what is operational technology? Hopefully all of you in the data center pretty much know what this is, but operational technology is the hardware and software that detects or causes a change through the direct monitoring and or control of industrial equipment, assets, processes, or events. So the best, or well, not best, the easiest example I can get is if you have a BMS system, you go in and you set the temperature setting on your crack unit from 72 to 75, that then goes out to a master PLC. That PLC connects to the controller within the CRAW unit and sets that threshold a little bit higher. So again, pretty simple concept, but again, and it's really around the IT of the non-carpeted spaces. Again, you work in data centers, you know that gray space is actually full of OT, generally just hidden behind lots of locked panels or panels with danger signs on them that we normally don't access. So on the little image on the right there, so that's just kind of some of the subtypes of OT, which I'm going to go into now. So starting off, ICS systems, so industrial control systems, pretty common one, but this is primarily used more in the manufacturing sector. So these are, you're going to have, your master control software, and hopefully you're not still using an AS400. Hopefully you're a little more modern, but unfortunately in the OT space, old technology is kind of the name of the game as well. But again, these are just those information systems used to process, for manufacturing, product handling, production, distribution. So again, your manufacturing floor, things doing, certain automated processes, that's probably backed by an ICS system. Getting into PLCs, the programmable logic controller. So this one is a favorite in data centers, and like I said, if you go behind your BMS panels, you'll probably find these things all over the place. Generally, I think that one is generally going to be like your master. You're going to have like your master controller on one side, some sort of network controller on the other side, and then generally all your points somewhere in the middle. But again, solid state control system that has that user programmable memory for storing instructions. So again, I will say like all of my CRAW units use these kinds of things and some other things within my data center. But again, these are the kinds of things you will find all over the place. Now, the next one is a little older, so this is the discrete process controller, and not a lot of great images of these because these things are quite ancient. Again, this is a very simple control system that's based around really basically it's a single control loop. So I have not seen these say pretty much, well, actually I stand corrected. So I think I have these kinds of things for like my UPS monitoring where it's one box to one device and it has like basically just a couple wires. These are kinds of all things you would see normally in your plants. But again, very simple device. I don't think I have personally seen any of these that are networked. So that's probably a positive in this conversation. But again, but at the same time, it is a very simple device. And then moving on down, so your SCADA system. So I think most of us probably heard of a SCADA system, but this is your supervisory control and data acquisition. Now, as far as seeing these in data centers, I think I have only seen one in I won't say the company, but it was a true tier 4 site somewhere in the Salt Lake region. And the reason they were using this is, when you have to manipulate switchgear or something on the electrical side, that while minimal, there is always a chance for something bad to happen, which then is a safety event, which then that person could be injured or even worse. But SCADA systems are primarily used more across, more of the utility industry, so your water, electrical, so used for controlling things across wide ranges. So I'll say like in the Phoenix Metro, we got SRP, APS, they got substations everywhere, various switches and controls. So they most likely use a SCADA system to monitor and control all of that. So with that, that is the various subtypes. And I will say, going a little bit off topic, so IoT. So in my opinion, I think most OT systems do qualify as IoT, but not all IoT qualifies as OT. So IoT, there are the industrial types, there's the medical types, there's the Arduino that I use to build gadgets at home. So tons of types of IoT, but I would say OT would be a subtype of IoT. So going a little bit further along, so brief history of IoT, and that's a cool, I'm assuming that's some sort of power plant. It was just kind of a cool image off Google I had to get to say, here to introduce this. But I think the next one is a little bit older. So probably somewhere, hopefully Cold War Europe or something like that. Hopefully that is still not in use. But the actual term OT was coined in a Gartner research paper in 2006. I did not know this. I thought the term OT had been probably around as long as IoT, but no, I think we just called them facility systems and things like that back in the day. So that's actually the paper there. So IT and OT interaction gives rise to new governance, which we haven't, some organizations have done well with that, but I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. But again, we all know OT has existed for many years. Actually as far back as like the late 1800s, 1900s, because actually Morse code systems were considered a type of operational technology. Again, typically your OT is going to be existed typically it was existing outside of your IT network. So these things were air gap back in the day. And I know there are some industries, I believe nuclear is one of them, where they still maintain air gap systems. And actually I can comment on that a little bit later, thinking about kind of getting into the bad side is more like Stuxnet. Well, we all know that attacked Iranian nuclear centrifuges that actually caused them to fail, but those were air gap systems that somehow we got a worm into, state-sponsored malware. But however, nowadays, and again, we had a lot of this conversation during the DSIM panel, where we want to start pulling that data from that operational technology to kind of prove value to the business and really help with our decision making, give us better insights, all that. I just talked in the last panel about being able to do the thermal monitoring across several hundred sites. That provides a lot of value versus not having that visibility and letting my stuff just blow up and fail. So again, we're starting to see a lot more integration between the IT and the OT spaces. All right, so let's talk about some interesting cybersecurity things. So the first one, like I said, look at the year on that one. 1903 was the first recorded IoT or OT hack. So the story behind this one, actually the man's name is Marconi. So he was, I believe, a researcher around Morse code, and he was trying to build a unhackable Morse code system. So he was doing a research project with, I believe it was a university in London. He was sitting in Cornwall. And what he was doing is he was sending a Morse code message from Cornwall to London. It was about 300 miles, they said, but he had a rival in London. So what his rival did is, he was analyzing the signal, found that the signal was actually not secure like Marconi thought, ended up intercepting it and conducted a man-in-the-middle attack, and then sent his altered message onto the university. And it was something silly. I mean, it wasn't like the hacks nowadays, but it was something silly. I think about farts. So I think it was yeah. Seriously, look it up. It was a pretty funny message that he ended up sending along. But of course, that's really where the funny stops, because now let's look at all the very terrible things that have happened. So Marucci water, 265,000 gallons of untreated sewage released. I don't know about you, but I don't want untreated sewage into my drinking water or released onto the streets or backflowing or anything like that. So again, that's when we kind of started seeing the attacks happen, really around the 2000s. Again, I mentioned Stuxnet. We all know that was the first really publicly known digital weapon created by the United States government as well as the Israeli government to target the centrifuges in Iran, because we've all remember probably those stories about how they were developing, I think they were working on developing nuclear weapons using uranium-235. So this was actually, again, this was an air-gapped network that somehow we got this USB drive into, knocked out those Windows machines, which ended up actually knocking their nuclear program offline for a few years. But of course, it also became publicly known because it did get loose. So thankfully, I don't think we recorded too much damage after that. But again, state-sponsored weapon, and got loose. Let's see, a few more interesting ones. Oh, Target. So 2013, out of curiosity, did anyone have their credit card in the room stolen off of that event? Okay, a few of you. So for those of you who don't remember, hackers actually got in through the HVAC system. So now they didn't modify the HVAC system, but they did use it to actually infiltrate the network. So again, another reason why you should be securing that OT. I mean, it's because you have kind of the both scenarios. You have the really bad scenario here of Marucci, where that was a life safety event, but then you also had the Target event, which that then became kind of more into the IT side of that, confidentiality, integrity of data. So again, that got loose there. Let's see. I got a few more examples here. Of course, on this page, you're going to see the Ukrainian attacks. I think that was Power Grid number 1 in 2005 or 2015 and 2016. So again, I think we probably remember these events where, I think it was, and I want to say it was Russia that ended up knocking their substations offline. Like you see there in Power Tech number 2, 30 substations and 225,000 residents without power. So that was a pretty major attack right there. Not Petya. So we probably remember Petya, not Petya. Well, not Petya was the one that basically, again, targeting Ukraine. So again, poor Ukrainians. That one's the one that kind of posed as ransomware, but without a way to pay it, and it bricked those systems. So again, that was a pretty terrible attack there. And looking at, return to Shamu. So we had Shamu on the one side, but we have Shamu here, again, targeting the Civil Aviation Agency. So again, and I will note, when I was researching cyber attacks in OT, I could not find a reliable source to say, do you have to report these things, yes or no? I think it's going to be more based on your industry. So like obviously in healthcare, we have to report like more than basically any sort of record breach around your healthcare information. Or like I said, we're also PCI compliant, so we have to also report any breaches around PCI. And I'm going to pull from a little bit of my older knowledge here. So I actually attended the McAfee conference in 2016, and there's a similar conversation around OT attacks, and again, at the time, there was no consistent reporting around OT attacks. And I'd say if you remember Bill's comment from yesterday's opener, that he said, do data centers really want to advertise that they have been attacked? No. So again, I would bet money that there are a lot more attacks out there than have been advertised. A few more recent ones I'd like to point out. Colonial Pipeline, I imagine any of you who live in the Southeast probably remember that one. That actually stopped the distribution of fuel. I think it was gasoline and jet fuel for several days. So, I mean, that one made national news. I think we all saw that on the CNN's, local news, et cetera. So, again, a really bad hack. The Oldsmar Florida water treatment plant. So that one was the opposite of Marucci. So Marucci was obviously sewage being released out into the wild. So Oldsmar was actually, they ended up actually dumping more chemicals into the water. It's something I believe to treat the water, which is normally, I think I read it's supposed to be 100 parts per million. Well, they ended up upping it to 11,000 parts per million, where it could burn your skin, blind you, crazy stuff like that. Again, you know, these things have, you know, true life safety measures. Iranian Railway, so this was an attack actually on Iranian railways that I think believe stopped rail traffic for several days. And of course, not good, but it's kind of a funny one. Las Vegas fish tank. I mean, again, it's very similar to the Target one where they infiltrated. So these guys actually infiltrated the fish tank that and it was an automated system that controlled feeding as well as water temperature. But again, they use this as a pivot point into the network. I was not able to find what casino that was because I'm sure they don't want that advertised that they got hacked through a fish tank. I mean, who would at the end of the day? But again, it's just to prove, you know, it could be either or. It could be a life safety event, or it could be just a way to pivot into your network and start stealing your data. So, and I will say, I'm going to go off script here for a second. So around cybersecurity and OT. If you go into the, so who here knows DEF CON? All right, you all know DEF CON, good. If you, I actually attended these sessions live, but in 2019, in DEF CON 101, there was a security session on SCADA systems as well as a security session on PLCs. I will say that the PLC attackers had a much tougher time working with PLCs. Reason being is they are a lot more costly. I think they said the entry point was around $30,000 for a base controller. So that doesn't give a lot of security researchers the opportunity to play with a SCADA system probably outside of and I'm going to say independent security researchers, if you know what I mean. While PLCs are available on the market for a couple $100 off eBay. So I will say the PLC hacks were way more impressive, where essentially there was no security down, and there was a few vendors they had on stage. They actually built a mock BMS. They had basically controlling a heating element in a cup of water, and they ended up spamming the binary point that turns on the heater 1,000 times a second, so the operator couldn't turn it off in the BMS, and it actually caused the cup of water to overflow. So, of course, that's a simple example, but you know, then I, as a data center operator, think about what if someone got into my PLCs and turned off all my air conditioning, and they were spamming the points and made it look like that it was, you know, hey, it was just equipment malfunction, while actually I was being hacked. So, again, something to think about. Now, let's get more into the challenges of OT management in the IT world. So, of course, one picture I use here, I think hopefully you all remember this one, the Aurora generator test. So that was 2007. That's where I believe I think it was national researchers in our government caused a literal generator to explode. By basically, and I think it was set, actually I pulled this clip off of YouTube, so definitely go find the clip, but I think it was 17 seconds into this gen run, it went boom. So again, just another way to show that, you know, you can infiltrate these devices and cause some damage. But again, as noted on prior slides, you know, OT has become a major target for threat actors. We never, I don't think we ever thought of this before because they were all air gas systems, and we never didn't really have to worry about it. But with OT, again, kind of I commented earlier, this is not only a risk to uptime and operations, it's human life at the end of the day. These are, you know, again, these are your HVAC systems, these are your electrical systems, these are the gen sets, these are, you know, everything that is used to control the physical. And as well as, you know, looking at the fish tank hack, looking at the target hack, these things are used as pivot points into an internal network. So kind of keep that in mind. Again, many OT devices were not built with cybersecurity in mind. Seriously, go look at your PLCs. Go back to your data center next week. Look at the PLCs. I mean, when you jump into them, there's no login. It's, hey, here's a screen on here's all the points. Here's how to program them. I say, like I said, that's PLCs. I imagine probably many other OT devices are the same way. It's just it's just a blank device. You program it, but if you don't keep this in mind, yeah, because they were built to be completely segregated at the end of the day. These things were not meant to be built into the IT space. But with that rapid integration into the IT space, this has caused an equally rapid attack surface on these organizations. So now you may be asking, hey, is this legitimate? Or, I had a few good examples in the prior slides, but are people still really doing this? So this is the next section here is either going to be the or the section of this presentation, just to tell you. All right, so for those of you who are not familiar, there is a tool out there called Shodan. So Shodan is a search engine, not like Google, Bing, and all those. So Shodan actually looks at endpoints on the internet. So, and I'll note this is the free version, so I didn't get to actually look at every result, and I did obscure the IP addresses to, to kind of hide the people who have, obviously done something wrong here. But let's go through a couple examples here. So Emerson, obviously the predecessor to Vertiv, top 410 results. Mainly, not actually, and this is one of the ones where the U.S. was not the major. So I think this was Brazil. Again, network Emerson power. Linux login, and that's of course out of China. PSU, so that may actually be a power supply in something. And again, and again, this is a great way. I was able to do simple reconnaissance. Took me all of 30 seconds to pull up the website, punch in Emerson, and look, I got results. I could take that IP address, I could throw it into my Kali box, start doing Mmap scanning, start doing further analysis, and pull up manuals where I think this device is, and then I can further infiltrate the network, like legitimately. So these things are, again, pivot points into networks. So Emerson one, that was an interesting one. Let's go into Vertiv. So some of the Vertiv ones actually had better results. You can actually see right here. So that's a Linux mini server. So again, I can then go find the manual for said device, because I'm going to bet if these things are exposed to the internet, they probably have default credentials on them as well. Great way to break in and, again, either further infiltrate that network or shoot. I mean, that right there, that is a Unity, which I believe the Unity cards are used in, I think, the cracks and UPSs. Again, I could cause some pretty quick chaos by using some default credentials, get in there, knock this thing offline. All right, next up, Allerton. Okay, so I'm sure all of you in here know what BMS is, building management systems. You probably work with your BMSs in your careers. So if you've ever worked with Allerton, I know because I have worked with Allerton. So right there, so the port number, 47808. Anyone recognize that port? That is the default for Allerton BMS systems. Those may actually be may be the central servers for these BMSs off of the internet, or at least other critical components of said BMS systems. And actually, I can see right here, so the first example out of, Chicago, so hopefully it's not someone we know in the room. I can see that application software is 1.6. I know 1.6 is not the most current, so this is probably a very old, and actually, look, boiler room. I actually know what I'd be impacting. It's boiler room VLCs. Again, this is again showing people are still putting things on the internet that should not be on the internet. Next one down. So again, Allerton, that one is at least version 3.0, but I can see again it's the Ethernet controller for the BCM. So again, and actually I can see additional broadcast points. So right there I can see their internal network 192.168.1.20 and .21. So I'm starting to actually through this. I had to do nothing, and I'm starting to learn about the internal layout of this organization in San Diego. Let's see, Honeywell. Okay, this is where the numbers get a little more shocking, 3,100 points. Now, I didn't find any BMS controllers, but I found DVRs on the internet. I mean, again, think about the crazy of this is I might be able to sneak into someone's DVR, and actually I think I highlighted, down there, so again, 47808, so again, more BMS on the internet from Honeywell. I mean, that's kind of crazy to think I might be able to infiltrate a DVR, and I don't know what that DVR is doing. It could be someone's security, it could be in a hospital, it could be in a data center, it could be anywhere. So again, don't put your stuff on the internet. And I think the next one was the most. Okay, APC, 7,000 hits, 7,000. Highlight the port there, so that is, I think, 3551. So that is the default port for Schneider's communication protocol. Again, so if I could reverse engineer that protocol, I can inject commands into something. Not good, but again, UPS, literally UPS, and I've got some information on their internal network right there. Again, APC logon, there's a Schneider logo. Web authenticate, again, and this took me literally 30 seconds to pull this up and find this information. So if you have your OT on the internet, please go back to your offices next week and pull it off of the internet, because I mean, thankfully I'm the good guy. I'm not going to go try and hack your stuff, but there are people that are going to try to go in and hack your stuff. Again, this is a free tool on the internet. Last but not least, that is Eaton. Only got a 63 hit, so good job, Eaton users. You are not putting your stuff on the internet like everybody else. But again, Power Expert meter right there. Probably UPS or some sort of other power system. So again, this was a very easy way to validate, yeah, people are still doing dumb things. Sorry. But let's go, okay, so let's put cybersecurity aside for a little bit, and let's start talking about other challenges. So people. Again, traditionally, IT/OT groups aren't managed by the same group. IT is, well, IT. And like I say, in my particular role, I report up through a CIO. Well, our OT group is actually under the Facilities and Design and Construction blanket, which then goes up to our Vice President of Design and Construction, up into, I want to say, our COO. So again, not managed by the same group, and again, OT is generally more facilities driven. And I will say that if between these two, if I had to bet on the nerd with the poor posture or the guy carrying the 500-pound wrench, I'm going to bet on the guy with the 500-pound wrench. So just saying there. And generally, these two groups don't always get along. Where, I mean, IT is seen as that roadblock to OT implementation. We ask a lot of questions. Well, why are you doing this? Why do you need this? Blah blah blah. And they're just going to go around us at the end of the day. While OT is going to see, ITC is seen as a roadblock to OT implementation. So they go around us. OT is seen as a nuisance by IT. So again, doing cybersecurity things, scanning the network, looking for endpoints, a whole bunch of OT things pop up. What is this? Again, we just kind of more see it, seen it as a nuisance traditionally, and there's just an overall lack of collaboration between the two groups. Again, they're managed separately, so that collaboration can be a little bit difficult. Again, kind of getting more of the people. Again, generally those engagements are relegated to throwing things over the fence. I have seen it my entire career where, hey, IT, we need some IP addresses. Throw over the fence. Okay, here it is. Don't ask any questions. Let's just give them what they need so they move along. Which obviously is not the best thing to do. And again, there's a lack of cross-training between these two disciplines, which really, at the end of the day, because of all these integrations, I mean, the OT folks and the IT folks should be really working a lot better together. Both sides know their world very well, but they know very little about each other. And again, that's a detriment to your organizations. All right. Other OT challenges, again, it's that kind of integration issues from OT to IT. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of businesses now want to start taking advantage of that OT data, pipe it into some sort of tool, get some sort of value out of it, but we are still dealing with Modbus and BACnet and things like that. So it can be a bit difficult to get those integrations done. Connectivity. There are, again, various proprietary and legacy protocols. If you look at BACnet, I mean, BACnet was created in the 90s, and I don't think it's really had too many updates since it was created back then. And again, let's start, Modbus. Even old school SNMP, those, SNMP v1 is generally considered no bueno anymore on your networks just because it is an insecure protocol. But if you don't have a device that can upgrade to v3 that has the security built into it, you're kind of stuck. Data collection, cloud integration. Well, data centers, we talk about cloud all the time. We probably want to start feeding that data into some sort of ML big data platform. But again, at the end of the day, it can be a little bit difficult to get that data up into there. And then finally, patch management, update management. For this thing here, Windows machine, we get patches monthly. Pretty easy. And our system administrators use SCCM, WSUS, whatever, push the patches out, applies to your box, you're secure again. Well, in the OT space, I worked with OT a fair amount in my career. Sometimes those patches come once a year, maybe once every 6 months, and generally it's not generally publicly known. I just happen to run across the website, oh hey, there's a new version, I better go update my stuff. But at the end of the day, when I was doing it, it was all manual, and if you have 1,000 devices to push to, it took me literally weeks to go push updates. And then I have to then wait for the next round and do it again and do it again and do it again. So that could be a real challenge, especially if you don't have a large team to do that patch and update management. Priorities. So, again, at the end of the day, we have different priorities in IT versus OT. IT, again, we are all about confidentiality and keeping that data secured and controlled. I think they call it CIA, so it's confidentiality, integrity, and I can't remember what the A is. I don't think it may be accessibility or something like that. But again, that's what IT is focused on. We are focused on the data and that data, bringing value to our businesses. Where OT, again, at the end of the day, it's life safety. These kinds of events do have the potential to be way more destructive than an IT event. So, yeah, a server gets hacked in the data center, but what happens if your data center goes offline because someone hacked your PLC and turned everything off? That's worse, at least in my opinion. All right, so let's get a little bit into addressing these challenges of IT-OT convergence. First off, I'm going to start off with people. I mentioned earlier that generally those two departments do not work well together, and that really they need to come together as partners. I will say in my personal journey at Banner that it took me a while to actually make this happen. When I got the promotion up to full IT director, it was 3 months, and then pandemic started. So we got away from actually doing things in person with each other. But thankfully, once we started easing restrictions, I actually went out into the field. I spent 2 weeks touring all of our sites, shaking the hands of the facility managers, going, how can I help you? And really, if you're having challenges, whether your facilities or IT, that's how it starts. Starts with the handshake and how can I help you? I don't ever ask for anything without offering first. So that is a great way to start rebuilding relationships. Just throwing it out there, but I've seen it personally, and not only my organization, where again, it's the two organizations don't get along really well, but you work for the same team at the end of the day. So while you're fighting, it really makes no sense. But again, remember you're both on the same team, and take the time to know each other. Take the time to know what your priorities are, and I can fully appreciate that. I've got facility managers who are trying to run hospitals. I get it. We are serving patient care at the end of the day. I serve patient care at the end of the day. Priorities are a little bit different, but again, that's kind of that whole one team thing. But again, I try to, wherever I can, I try to help them out. Then if I ask them for, hey, can you help me with a UPS thing or something in the facility, then it's like they're way more glad to help than if I just kind of come up barking orders. I don't do that anymore. Hard lesson learned, by the way. Both groups should be engaged in reviewing the challenges and solutions to solve OT problems. Again, stop throwing things over the fence, please. Just stop it. Work together, collaborate, make some sort of architectural council, or at least, have meetings and discuss what you're implementing. Because things happen a lot quicker if you're working together versus, again, throwing things over the fence to each other. Cross-training wherever you can, that would be awesome. And really, I want to, hit home on that point, cross-functional group. I am, in my particular role, I feel I definitely sit on the fence between IT and facilities. And I have purviews into both, and that really does help me run my data centers very well. So again, try to create that cross-functional group, a couple leaders here, a couple leaders here, a couple engineers, bring you all together and, just discuss things and figure out, how you can help each other out. So again, build that cross-functional team. It doesn't have to be an official org. Now, if you can make that happen, that is phenomenal, but it doesn't have to be an official org. It could just be just a group you have within your organization. All right, technology processes. So I'm going to pull a little bit this from kind of ITIL, ITSM processes, but wherever you can, have asset management for those devices. I don't know how many times I have been called to go, hey, Ryan, where's this OT thing? And I'm going, oh, shoot, okay. I have to kind of reverse engineer the name, look at the IP address, track it down, and that is not easy at the end of the day. Some of these things are hidden behind panels. They're above the ceiling, they're below the floor. They could be in closets that are in the basements. So, wherever you can, make sure you at least document the OT to the best of your ability. I know it can be difficult, but definitely try. Configuration management as well. So, kind of the earlier thing, talking about the PLCs and all that, make sure you keep a copy of those configurations. Don't don't just kind of rely on, hey, it will work and it won't blow up and fail, because I have seen it where they blow up and fail. Definitely keep a copy of those configs, USB stick, paper, something. Just make sure you keep that. Now, I will say the third one is, again, to my earlier point, that's going to be a hard one, patch and firmware management. Now, there are tools out there. Now, these are, I'm trying to think of a few names. I know Assembly is in the more of the medical IoT space, but it does touch OT a little bit. Elicity, and there's a few others out there that can actually go out, scan your network, and go against publicly known databases and look at, okay, is device X patched up to level Y, or is it below level Y and needs some attention? So there are tools out there that exist. Basically, they're discovery tools that are built more for the OT space. So they do exist. Again, to my earlier point, if you do want to look at such tools, just make sure, write your requirements, take a hard look, POV, all that good stuff. And if you can, have a test lab. I will say, one of the best things about my area is I do have a full test lab. So I'll give you a good example. So right now, I am actually in the middle of procuring lithium-ion UPSs. So before I procure, I placed a $300,000 order for lithium-ion UPSs, by the way, so a large fleet of them. But before I did, I told the vendors, hey, I want a demo unit. Brought it in, put it in my test lab, connected to my Sunbird system, made sure everything worked well, made sure it didn't, blow up out in a hospital, and it did really work. It works very well to have that in a a controlled environment, so you can play with it before you send it out to the field. But again, if you can do that, have a little workbench of, I've even seen it where build a plywood wall, throw a couple PLCs on it, wire it up. I mean, that's also a great little training lab at the same time too. So think of that. Utilize those IT solutions where possible. I mean, if your organization already has a ServiceNow or something like that, why go buy something else? You've already got it. Because what you're doing at the end of the day is you're making that tool even more valuable, and you're saving money. So again, kind of getting into that asset management, config management. If you can, let me jump back there. Again, try to bring those things into your ITSM if possible. If not, well then go look for what you need. But again, try to reuse where possible. Save a few dollars. And again, build those architectures that both groups agree upon. Take the time, learn the solutions, cross-train, and figure out the best way to implement something in a secure manner, and try to also make it as efficient as possible. All right, so kind of getting back into a little bit of the cybersecurity, because obviously I ranted a lot about cybersecurity, so I have to rant on it a little bit more. But addressing cybersecurity challenges, and again, these are all kind of best practices taken out of the IT space. Will you be able to do every one of them with every device? Probably not. Again, if you're dealing with stuff from the 90s or, well, that was designed in the 90s and never updated, you're going to have to be a little creative. I'll say that. I will bold there. It's not best practice, but it may be your only solution. If you are dealing with technology that just cannot be secured at all, air gap it. Not a great solution, but, and it can still be breached. LS.next, but again, try to do the best you can with it. And I believe that, like I said, I've heard that is still used in the nuclear industry today, just because those systems are so old and you don't dare connect them to anything, because they would be breached pretty quickly. Where possible, implement new OT devices with security built in. I know they exist. I have talked to several of the OT vendors, so they are transitioning, well, and some of them make the old things still, but some of them are now transitioning to Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. Now, Arduinos, if you ever played with them, basically it's just a little board you program. I mean, I use them in hobby kits. And again, you can at least write some secure code for them. Now, if you physically get access to it, it's all over. And I say with Raspberry Pis too, because that's a Linux device. You could lock down that Linux image. So, kind of keep that in mind. Ensure that hardened configuration. So if you can use a newer device, implement that hardened configuration, and use change management. So again, I'm harping on the ITSM principles. Because at least if you document and you do a change, something goes sideways. Hey, you got documentation. You can back it out. You can go back to whole again. So don't forget that. Where possible, again, and again, point number 4 there will be, or point 3, I should say, will be reliant on the OT manufacturer. So if you've got some really old stuff, you might want to go push on them to, push patches out. But again, make sure you try to patch them in a timely manner. Segregate OT devices from other network traffic. So this has been a hot topic. I'm sure most of you have heard of things like zero trust and segmented networks. So I would say that is very important. Your OT should be on some sort of segregated network, have an access list or some sort of other access control. Keep them away from your other IT things. Again, first off, you don't want a lot of traffic going to that network anyways. You should be able to see, okay, it's my BMS talking to the OT, and that is it. Or if you see something funny, well, then you just cut it off, and then you're not have to worry about then the targets and the Las Vegas fish tank scenarios where people are getting into your internal data. Again, both scenarios are bad. All right. Practice is put in place. Again, just a little bit more monitoring. I mean, we can't harp on monitoring enough. Please monitor your OT traffic. So again, there are plenty of tools out there. I think I mentioned a few of them, but you can also use, I think, Cisco, Arista, several of those other manufacturers do have that telemetry monitoring, pulled into your central monitoring system. Make sure if you see any anomalies, go investigate and resolve it quickly. Where you can, proper identity management. Now that's getting a little deeper, and I don't know, a lot of these devices have that, but try to avoid shared accounts where possible. Don't have just, user 123, anything like that. Antivirus, again, where possible. Now, most likely that won't be on the OT device itself, but it may be on the controller. So maybe your BMS system like that. So again, where you can, try to use that. Encrypt the data. I mean, I don't think I have to say too much on that. Disable ports, inputs on devices. If you don't need it turned on, don't leave it turned on. I mean, again, just proper hygiene. You leave a whole bunch of ports open on a web server because, again, you can get breached that way. And finally, crisis management. If a crisis were to strike, make sure you have well-written procedures and, obviously that cross-functional team trained to be able to respond. I mean, as I said, OT can be a data breach. It can be a life safety event. So make sure that you have proper crisis management in place and you can respond quickly because, you never know. Again, it could be someone trying to break your gens and blow them up. So and I think with that, that's my last slide. So I know that was a lot. Any questions I can answer? Joe.
Have you had challenges dealing with the operational side by anybody that just didn't want to cooperate?
Yes, that is a big yes. And that, again, that kind of gets into working creatively with those people. And I'd say I can only think, well, actually, no. I think I've actually been able to resolve most of those, actually all those issues with those particular personnel. But again, it's kind of sometimes it's back off for a week, come back to them and go, hey, how can I help you? Sometimes we're a little hot in the moment, and sometimes they just have a bad day. So I will say, yes, I have had to deal with those challenges throughout my career. Again, just trying to be personal, trying to be understanding, try to help them out before I ask for something that has generally worked for me. So, all right. Chris. I would assume, yeah, so you're talking like the Modbus or like BACnet to Ethernet, et cetera. Again, that would be another OT point. So again, I would just make sure that you evaluate them as appropriately when you're looking at those in your network. So I think I saw a hand in the back. Yes, sir.
So when you say SCADA, are you talking about control and acquisition?
Yes, sir. Yep, both.
So for acquisition, you would call it a DNS, right?
Yes.
So what I'd recommend if you think about it too, another way, especially with PLC, is specify the equipment. Always specify it so that it does not have removable media sensors and SD cards, because a lot of programmers like to keep that. And you can order it that's got a solid state drive on it.
Yep.
That has all the ports.
That is a fantastic point.
The other thing is your IT guys cannot touch the PLC on generators, UPSs, switchgear, automatic transfer gear. Your IT guys can't touch that.
Fully agree. Yep.
The vendor has to do that because we use in our data center enterprise all the time.
Yep.
And especially when you have pre-programmed sequence of operation. For example, you lose utility and you want to start generators, the PLC is going to do it.
Yep.
And when you transfer over from UPS back to generator power, the PLC is going to do that. You don't want your IT guys touching that. You want your vendors
Yep.
on site.
No.
So it's not just the IT guy.
No, I fully agree with that. Yeah, anything that is uber critical to your operations, make sure you have the properly trained personnel handling it. Now, like I said, I would say give the IT guys this not input into it, but just kind of at least keep them in the loop that, oh, hey, there's these things, they're connecting through, they're very critical, don't touch them, have documentation, but to your point, yes, they should not be modifying those because they are not the experts in it. Agreed. Who else? I think I saw a few more. Yes, ma'am. Whew. I mean, if I had my preference as the IT guy, I would probably, what we're trying to deem internally is probably SMTP, or so SNMP v3. But SNMP v3 though isn't, I mean, it's great for doing some basic back and forth communication, but I have not seen it really progress. I think BACnet is still the prominent one within the industry. I haven't seen it really progress, because, but like the individual pieces, like some of the ones I pointed out on the Shodan searches, those are probably more SNMP based, or yeah, SNMP based versus BACnet based. But yeah, it's pretty much still BACnet, I think, for the most part. I think there's still Modbus if you have older UPS units and all that, but we put converters on them now to go to Ethernet and then back into the BMS. Yep. Anything else? Okay. All right, well then with that, I think we have, I'll give you a whole 4 extra minutes back. Again, appreciate you sticking around and listening to me on this one, so hopefully you found this useful.